Here we go, let's waste no time, starting with last Thursday's Week 2 opener. The Chiefs eked one out against the LA Chargers. Biggest story here was Justin Herbert and his fractured rib cartilage. On one play, on 3rd and 1, he can barely move his arm. On the next play, 4th and 1, he throws a dime. Later that drive, he drops another one in the back of the end zone to help you and I cover on that plus 3.5 Chargers spread. But the big story here, the Chiefs are in the driver's seat right now in the AFC West, while the Chargers are reeling. Herbert's rib injury could be something he's dealing with on a weekly basis for most of the year, especially if he continues to try to play through it. Fantasy owners like me are scrambling a bit if you have Herbert in your lineup. Probably best to have a backup plan this week, but a lot to watch here. Is the table being set for the Chiefs to make another Super Bowl run? Moving on, let's talk about two teams that will not be making a Super Bowl run this year. The Colts were so good against Jacksonville on Sunday. How good? I hear you asking. Well, I'm going to tell you, they were so good that they shut themselves out. Absolutely 0 points scored. Now 24 points were scored on the other side for Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, 25 of 30 for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yes, you heard that right. 25 of 30. One of the most efficient days in NFL history as far as completion percentage goes. James Robinson continues to look like the lead back with 23 carries, although he did only manage 64 yards and a touchdown. The leading receiver, surprisingly, was Ashton Dulin, who we did suggest as a waiver wire pickup last week. So make sure you are checking us out on Twitch, Bite Size Sports, to get those updates, and maybe you'll find somebody that you like. But that is just for fun, and we are not here to make you spend any money. So now that disclaimer's out of the way, let's talk about why the Colts got smacked outside of their just overall ineptness. Michael Pittman was out. Alec Pierce was out, who, although he had a bad week 1, did not catch a pass and dropped a couple. He is their number 2. He was drafted highly out of Cincinnati for a reason. And on the defensive side of the ball, Shaq, the artist formerly known as Darius Leonard, was out again for the Colts. So 2 of their best players on each side of the ball, and then their number 1 and number 2 targets on the offensive end. Still not an excuse for how bad this looked, but as I heard it mentioned on Twitter, should the Jags get some credit for this as well? Jag fans are saying, I get that the Colts are bad. When do the Jags start to get some credit? That may be next week. So there's 2 stories here. One, the Colts are dead in the water, which I do not believe, mind you, but that's an episode for another day. And that the Jaguars are the best team in the AFC South as of right now. Could you even call that an overreaction? Based on the sample size that you have seen, the 8 games that you have seen these 4 teams play, who is the best team in the AFC South? Let us know in the comments below. Moving on, the Packers put the Bears in their place 27-10 as poor Justin Fields just looks like he can't catch a break. There's no protection. I got frustrated watching the game, at one point even exclaiming, it sure would be nice if Justin Fields would look to pass on 3rd and long, but I think the reality is, as I go back and look at the tape, that it's not all on him. I do think at a point late in that game, he did just decide that the pressure was coming so quickly that his best bet, if the first option wasn't there, that he was going to run it. But I need to give him the benefit of the doubt here. But this is not working in Chicago. That offense looks very bad. and the monsoon of week 1 helped to mask their actual poor play. Anybody who grabbed Mooney in an earlier mid-round is just beside themselves in fantasy. So the Packers are back on track. Everybody relax. Sammy Watkins continues to seem to be the main guy here. I don't know how long that will last, but he led the game with 93 receiving yards on 3 catches. Rodgers looked a little more like himself. 19 of 25, 234 yards and 2 tutties. Aaron Jones continues the trend of Packers running backs driving you nuts, as he only had 15 carries but took it a $132 and took one to the house. So good luck deciding if it's going to be Jones or A.J. Dillon week to week. I don't know how we're going to answer that one, but that's not what this show, or at least this episode, is about. So moving on to Jets-Browns. Oh, cue the sad trombone. Oh my God. This was an insane finish, mind you. I used to feel a lot worse for the Browns in these situations, and then certain things have happened over the last off season or so, and I just don't quite feel as bad for them as I used to. But that being said, this epic collapse, 14 points. Was it inside 2 minutes? The first time it's happened in 20 years. And the last time that happened, it was against the Browns. Joe Flacco turned back the clock on 44 attempts. He had 307 yards. Yes, you heard it. 4 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson, who hopefully was stashed on your fantasy bench as well, is now probably going to want to be in that flex spot depending on your depth. 8 receptions for 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb had 17 carries, 87 yards, and 3 touchdowns. One of them, unfortunately, being the somewhat controversial end-of-game touchdown that put the Jets in the position to score a touchdown and then recover the onside kick. So Chubb did take the blame, so to speak, accept accountability, I think is a better way to say it, for his role in the loss, as did Coach Kevin Stefanski. But that's really bad luck. That just doesn't happen. Of course, he's right. The best play would have been to go down and to continue to chew the clock. But in that situation, again, this hasn't happened in 20 years. And again, it happened to the Browns last. So the takeaway here is the Browns are still the Browns. They are cursed. I can't remember why, but the curse is real. Maybe someday we'll dive into all of those details. But for now, the curse is real, and the Jets will continue to be a place you can scour the waiver wire for emergency fill-ins. God damn. Are the Jets, are they going to once again, is this going to be 2 years in a row where they just have the most stunning anomaly out of the quarterback position when it comes to fantasy football? Like, was this week's Joe Flacco performance, was this our Mike White of 2022? What is going on? The Jets are just a fantasy football enigma, and it's one of the reasons that the league is still so much fun to watch. This next one probably wasn't a lot of fun to watch unless you are a Lions fan, although it did get a little more interesting in the fourth quarter. The Lions take down the Washington Commanders 36-27. Big story here, Goff throws 4 touchdown passes. Lions leading receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown had 9 catches for 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also was the game's leading rusher with 2 of them for 68 yards, and he is single-handedly carrying about half of my fantasy rosters right now, and we just love it. Carson Wentz, who may or may not still be available in your waiver wire, had 30 completions on his 46 attempts, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns. All 27 of the Commanders' points came in the second half here. They came on strong, and again, speaking in fantasy sense at least, Their receivers, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, and McLaurin, all seem to be doing well. In fact, surprisingly, McLaurin, I think, has the fewest points out of those three. Fact check me on that one. That's not 100% been researched, but it's very close. All three of them are producing equally, I will say that. But the big story here is, are the Lions legit? Are the Lions for real? We will find out with certainty when they play the Vikings. Actually, that's a lie. There's an overreaction. There's the one right there. The Vikings, we mentioned enigmas a minute ago, and if the Vikings aren't that, and just every year, man, can't peg them week to week. I just can't figure them out. Another team like that I can't quite figure out from week to week are the New Orleans Saints, who were unable to continue their winning streak against Tom Brady, as they too shut out their opponent in the first half, only to give up 20 points in the second half to the Bucs. And Tampa Bay only scored 3 points throughout the first three quarters. They scored 17 in the fourth. The Saints scored their only touchdown in the fourth as well. So this was a game that I hope you did not start from the beginning, you poor soul. Leonard Fournette, 24 carries for 65 yards. I'm not a calculator, but that's not a great yards per carry, although he is in the top 5 in the NFL right now as far as rushing yards. So if those touchdowns start to come, I think you'll be safe with Lenny, as long as he's your RB2. My God, I hope he's not your first guy. Jameis Winston, 25 of 40 for 236 and a touchdown. Yes, Jameis out through Tom Brady here. Chris Olave, we mentioned his buddy a minute ago, didn't we? He led this game with 5 receptions and 80 yards, and I would sincerely doubt that he is available anymore in any of your leagues, so I hope you took advantage of that in week 1 or week 2 when he was still available on your waiver wire. If you're in a 10-team league, maybe he's there, and in that case, it may be worth a stash. Panthers versus... Wait. Big takeaway is that the Bucs, who are 2-0, by the way. The Bucs, Bucs are scared here. They have to be scared. You know how scared the Bucs are? Tom Brady practiced on his day off. It was just news not that long ago that he was going to be getting Wednesdays off to rest, but their wide receiving situation is so bad, made worse with Mike Evans' short-term suspension, that they signed Cole Beasley out of retirement, despite the NFL's policies with the COVID vaccine. So they're willing to take that risk. So Tom's in taking snaps with everybody, trying to build a rapport here, and the Bucs they got to be scared. Gronk is going to be getting a call around week 12, I imagine. Somehow they may still win the division because the division is that bad. But the Bucs, is this the real? I hate to say it, he's on one of my squads, but is it finally the beginning of the end for old Tom? I was wrong the first time I said that 5 years ago, but maybe that's what's happening now, since I already spoiled it. Panthers versus Giants. This was my nominee going into the week for Who Cares? The game I would be least likely to watch if it weren't for fantasy football. And luckily for me, I don't have many players on either of these teams. 19-16. This one's going so poorly that there are already rumors that Baker Mayfield should have to hand the starting job back to Sam Darnold. Folks, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel and you haven't watched before, go ahead and look for our Sam Darnold videos there. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and find them. Things are bad. All I'm trying to say is things are very bad when you were calling for Sam Darnold. This guy was getting booed last year. His receivers were yelling at him. I have nothing against him personally, but he doesn't seem to be the answer. And after 2 games, they're already calling for him to go ahead and take the reins from Baker. So people are probably seeing even worse than what we're seeing on the field if they're starting to reach for that. So I don't know. Maybe he'll turn it around. But the Giants, 2-0. New York Giants. Who'd have thunk it? Daniel Jones. This should speak volumes towards our last topic. Daniel Jones, 22 completions on 34 attempts for 176 yards, you heard me, and 1 touchdown. Christian McCaffrey, 15 carries, 102 yards. Rick James, I think is it Richard James? I'm sorry. Giants wide receiver, 5 receptions for 51 yards. This one was a snoozer. Neither of these teams excite me. But yes, trouble in paradise. I hope Baker sold as many t-shirts as he could, because I think his time in Carolina is about over. Moving on. Patriots and Steelers. If this isn't the most like throwback, old school dynasty, two teams that at one point their franchises were just the pinnacle of the AFC. Overall, if you look at it historically, you would still probably make that argument. They're both rocking young QBs, although Pittsburgh seems to be keeping their QB of the future at bay for now. I don't believe it's Mitch Trubisky. Mac Jones looked a little more like that guy for New England as they eked out the 3-point 17-14 win. He was 21 for 35, 252 yards and a touchdown. Damian Harris made me strongly regret throwing him on the bench as a last-minute tinker, which you can enjoy my, miscomings live Sunday late morning at Bite Size Sports on Twitch. Harris had 15 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown, and should probably stay in your flex. But we'll talk more about that when we do the Week 3 predictions. Nelson Aguilar, 6 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown, and probably the highlight of the week, or at least one of them, at least the offensive side of the ball. The Steelers, I mean, it's tough to have a big takeaway here because the Patriots, I don't think any of this matters because the Bills are to the AFC East what the Patriots used to be, at least this year. And with Pittsburgh, I kind of thought this division was just down to Cincinnati and Baltimore, but it's kind of anybody's game. And but losing to the Patriots doesn't help. This isn't a great team. Who cares, right? Just shuffling chairs on the Titanic. One of these teams will probably be a wild card, though. Which one do you think it will be? Let me know. Is your big overreaction on this game? Moving on to the game of the week? Question mark? As the Dolphins, you want to talk about comebacks, outscore the Ravens 28-3 in the fourth quarter to win 42-38. Tua, on 50 attempts, completed 36 passes for 469 yards and 6 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill had 11 receptions for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson was the game's leading rusher, had 119 yards and a touchdown on 9 carries. The Ravens really need J.K. Dobbins to come back. They have no other options in the running game, and it's evident they still managed to move the ball because of Lamar Jackson. But it's clear that they need that. Bateman played very well. Andrews played well. Duvernay had he had the kick return. So he's got the big play potential every week now, it seems. But clearly the defense has got some stepping up to do in the fourth quarter. But it really would have helped in this fourth quarter to have a running game. And Kenyon Drake was a disappointment. Don't believe ESPN's fantasy projections. Don't ever do it. I succumbed to that one in Tinker time as well. It projected him as a starter to score 15 points. And he should be back in your league's free agent pool by now. But the Dolphins, sneaky AFC contender? Question mark. That's my big takeaway from this. Are the Dolphins a real contender for the AFC, and I think that even asking that question is an overreaction. Falcons make a comeback. They were tired of always giving up big leads, so they figured they'd try to squander one last week, and they almost did it too. Continuing our trend of big fourth quarter runs, they outscored LA, the Rams version, 17-3 to lose 31-27. All of our leaders came from the LA side. Stafford, 272 yards, 3 tutties. Henderson had 47 and a touchdown on 10 carries. Cooper Kupp had 11 receptions for 108 yards, 2 touchdowns, as he probably murdered you in fantasy. Rams don't look good. That's my big takeaway. Super Bowl hangover. I don't think this team gets anywhere close to the Super Bowl. Not the way they look right now. Not even sure they get to the NFC Championship. I can see this team out in the first round right now. They're still a playoff team as it stands, but no. And this next game was full of sadness, but then it had its moment. It had its returning hero. It was the Niners put the Seahawks back in their place as Geno Smith came back to earth. 24 of 30 for 197 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. Of course, he was the game's leading passer because Trey Lance went down with an unfortunate season-ending ankle injury, and Jimmy Garoppolo came in late. Speaking of injuries, Jeff Wilson Jr. led the game with 84 yards on 18 carries, filling in for the injured Elijah Mitchell and answering the questions that I had last week about concerns with Jeff Wilson's touches. I think now, especially with Trey Lance out, those concerns can go out the window. And unless you have that strong third receiver in your flex, Jeff Wilson could be a strong candidate. Speaking of strong receivers, Lockett, 9 for 107, showing that he is still a valuable, if not the only valuable Seahawks receiver left, because I don't know that Geno Smith is going to open it up downfield a lot this year. But will Jimmy G be able to reignite the magic and get the Niners back into Super Bowl contention? That's the big takeaway from this one. The Niners are back, baby. They are going to ride this nostalgia. It's so weird. It's such short-term nostalgia. The dude basically missed a game and a half, right? He was starting their playoff game. The last game of the season last year, Jimmy G was the starter. And now he gets to have this, after the weird, tumultuous offseason, they get to have this renaissance. It's almost like Tom Brady's 2-week retirement. But nonetheless, they have it. The Cinderella story is back. And we have a similar. We have a Cinderella of old and a current Cinderella, a red-headed Cinderella. As the Bengals took on the Cowboys, and the Bengals, their disappointment continues. A rough start. I just talked about the Super Bowl hangover as it pertains to the LA Rams, but I don't know if you guys remember this. There used to be a myth or a rumor, much like, the Madden curse and all that kind of stuff, that would talk about in the 2000s, in the aughts, and the teens. They would talk about the Super Bowl hangover, but what that would be in reference to would be the fact that for many years in a row, or at least many years throughout that period, maybe there were some gaps, but it was very often that the team who would lose the Super Bowl the following year would fail to even make the playoffs. And right now, I do have that fear for the Bengals. They still have all the talent that they had on the outside, and whatever upgrades we thought they had made on the offensive line don't appear to be upgrades. And there's also some injuries on that front, and it seems like somehow Joe Burrow has even less time to throw the ball than he had last year. Add to that the fact that this team's not catching anyone by surprise. In fact, they have the target on their back. They're one of the games that teams will have marked on their schedule. So not a good look. And then to drop one that you really need to win when you go play a Cowboys team that doesn't have Dak Prescott, and to have Cooper Rush go 19 for 31, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, and then Noah Brown being the leading receiver, 5 receptions, 91 yards, 1 touchdown. He is a guy. He was available at least in a lot of my leagues. Picked him up on waivers, so if you need some wide receiver help. He doesn't seem to be getting the credit, but if you watched the game, they talked about it in the commentary. Noah Brown's been around for a minute, and he's been on the Cowboys practice squad. So at least for the time period while Cooper Rush is the quarterback, while we did see CeeDee Lamb eat, he had, I think, 9 catches. I think he had more yards than Brown. I'm actually confused as to why Brown's showing up at 91 yards. Maybe I'm misremembering, but either way, while CeeDee Lamb had the majority of the targets, Noah Brown has a great rapport with Cooper Rush and could be a valuable add if you need some flex coverage in the next coming weeks. I think the Cowboys are bouncing back here. I think the big takeaway, though, is the Bengals. The poor Bengals and their Super Bowl hangover. Oh, we're going to move to another one that I guess has some takeaways. The bounce back, if you want to call it that, of the Broncos, who scored 10 unanswered in the fourth quarter to beat the Texans 16-9. Another just incredibly boring game. I think even including the fourth quarter, it was boring. Sutton went off, 7 receptions for 122. I believe Judy went down with an injury. I don't know his status, if he's playing this week or not. Williams for Denver had 75 yards on 15 carries. Russell Wilson had one of the worst games of his career completion percentage-wise, completing less than half of his 31 attempts. He had 14 completions for 219 yards and a touchdown. That should scare people, or that has scared people, but I want to calm you a little bit, because look at this guy's career, and something like that is an anomaly. For this guy to complete less than half his passes just doesn't happen. So I think everyone should calm down with the Broncos. I think Russ will figure it out. I do not think they're going to be as good as some people like myself originally had planned. I thought they were ripe to move on into contendership, to potentially even be a team that's in there, in it to the last minute, playing for a shot to go to the AFC Championship. I mean, Russell Wilson just has that kind of experience, and it really seemed like offensively all this team was missing was a quarterback, and that they had a good defense. So I still think this team can flirt with the playoffs, but it's not looking good. After being 1-1 after playing Seattle and Houston, and then to only beat Houston by 7, and in a sense to have to come from behind in the fourth quarter to do it, I don't know. Maybe it's building character, but as of now, very scared for the Broncos. Maybe it was not worth the Russell Wilson trade. Another team out west, AFC West, I thought was going to be the best division in football. Not looking that way right now, as the Raiders, unfortunately, fall apart as we continue and put a cap really on this trend, because, spoiler alert, we won't see it in our Monday slate, as the Cardinals scored 22 unanswered in the fourth quarter and overtime, including some crazy plays from Kyler Murray to get the touchdown and 2-point conversion to send it to overtime, and then the unfortunate fumble that Scoop and scored to end the game. And the Raiders, unfortunately, at 0-2, I mean, they're much better 0-2 than some of the other teams that are 0-2 right now. Honestly, to include our 2 tied winless teams, I would even throw them in there and still say Raiders are towards the top of that heap. But unfortunately, it is a heap. And I said it before and I'll say it again. I think Josh McDaniels was a bad hire. I don't expect us to see him gone anytime soon. I think if this team really implodes, we could see it within 1 year, but I don't think that's likely. But this Raiders team, by all accounts, they should have been better than last year. And they have a ton of skilled players. And they're just... they're scared. So, 1 and done. That's my takeaway right now. 1 and done from Josh McDaniels. Now, here we go. The aforementioned Monday night slate. Bills thumped the Titans. What do you even say? I got 2 things to say right now. Titans are looking a bit like a fraud when comparing last year to this year. Of course, lost some very big pieces. We are now seeing the value of A.J. Brown in the Philly offense as well. And so maybe it was a bit foolish to think he could be replaced so easily. And the other thing is that the Bills are the truth. Now, I did say this offline earlier today, and I'm going to stand by it. I don't think that the Bills are going to keep beating teams by 30 points every week. I don't think they need to do that to continue to be arguably the best team in the league. But I do think these margins will start to tighten up. But it was just a slaughter. The stats were monstrous. Allen and Diggs were huge, connected for 3 touchdowns together. Allen had 317 yards, 4 touchdowns. Diggs just under 150 yards on his 12 catches. And James Cook, in garbage time, ended up taking the lead in rushing yards with 53. So hopefully they followed that up with a much more interesting NFC game, right? No, wrong. No points were scored in the second half at all, as if to say, screw you guys, you got all these exciting Sunday second halves. What are we going to give you? 24 total points in our second half, all scored by the Bills, as they blew the Titans out of the water, and the Eagles and Vikings just did nothing in the second half. So 17-point second quarter is really what put this thing on ice for Philly. I keep hearing Cousins is going to have a bounce-back week. I hope so. Goddard was the leading receiver of the game. Miles Sanders looked okay, pretty solid, 17 carries, 80 yards. Hurts, only 5 incompletions out of his 31 passes for 333 yards and a touchdown. And my takeaway here is fly, Eagles, fly. Clearly the favorite in the NFC East. So there we have it. That is the Overreaction cast for week 2. It's time to jump on out of here and make our picks against the spread before the Thursday night game begins. And don't worry, way more content coming. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that cool stuff to be notified for more. And I appreciate you for being here. See you next time.